I never imagined that something as simple as a family dinner could shake the foundation of my marriage. Sitting in the car, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, I replayed the moment in my head. The slap, the silence, the look on my wife's face. My cheeks still burned, not just from the sting of Gloria's hand, but from the realization that the woman I married, the woman I thought loved me, had chosen her mother over me in the most humiliating way possible. It had started as an ordinary evening. Madeline had insisted we attend dinner at her parents' house, despite my reservations. Gloria had never liked me. From the very first time we met, she made it clear she thought her daughter was settling by marrying me. He's not from the kind of family we associate with, she had once whispered to her husband, thinking I wouldn't hear. I heard. I always heard. But I loved Madeline, so I tolerated Gloria's passive-aggressive remarks, her snide comments, the way she looked at me like I was a cockroach that had somehow crawled into her home. I endured it all because I thought Madeline was worth it. Tonight, though, I learned just how wrong I was. Dinner had been in full swing, the dining room filled with the clatter of silverware, forced laughter, and the usual boasting from Gloria about how perfect her life was. I had gotten up to refill my glass when it happened. I accidentally brushed against Gloria as I turned. It was nothing, barely a touch, but in her world, it was a crime worthy of punishment. Before I could even process what was happening, her hand connected with my face. A loud slap. Sharp. Public. Humiliating. The room fell into absolute silence. Every pair of eyes turned to me. The weight of their judgment pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. My ears rang. My mind scrambled to understand. Gloria was staring at me, her lips curled in disgust as she spat out words that burned just as much as her slap. How dare you touch me, you disgusting man. Clean my dress and get out. Disgusting man. As if I were nothing more than dirt beneath her feet. I stood there, frozen, not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to believe what had just happened. This wasn't a mistake. She had meant to humiliate me. And worse, she expected me to accept it. I turned to Madeline. Surely, she would step in, tell her mother she was overreacting. I wasn't asking for much, just the barest form of support, the slightest indication that she saw me as her husband and not just some insignificant outsider. But instead, Madeline's gaze was empty, cold even. And then she said the words that made my stomach drop. Apologize to her or leave. I could have laughed at how ridiculous it was. Apologize? For what? For existing in Gloria's presence? For standing too close to her? For daring to breathe the same air? My lips parted, but no words came out. I searched Madeline's face for something. Remorse, regret, even hesitation. But there was nothing. Just indifference. That was the moment everything changed. I had spent years bending over backward to prove myself to this family. I tolerated their judgments, their veiled insults, their endless comparisons to the men they thought Madeline should have married. I did it all for her. And in return, when I needed her most, she sided with them without hesitation. I exhaled slowly, the tightness in my chest making my decision for me. I wasn't going to apologize. I was done playing their game. With a quiet nod, I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't argue. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Because I wasn't broken. I was angry. And beneath that anger was something much colder, much sharper. Resolve. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face, soothing the heat still lingering from Gloria's slap. My mind raced, but for the first time in a long while, it wasn't clouded by the need to please anyone. I saw things with painful, crystal clarity. They thought I left in shame, that I walked out because I was weak, that they had won. They were wrong. I wasn't leaving in defeat. I was leaving to prepare a surprise they would never forget. By the time I reached my car, my plan was already forming. They wanted to humiliate me? Fine. But they would soon learn that I don't take humiliation lightly. They had spent years looking down on me, treating me like I was beneath them. Tonight, they had made a mistake that would cost them. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I knew would understand the weight of what had just happened. Carter. Carter was more than just a friend. He was someone who thrived on exposing people's dirty secrets. He had helped me out of messy situations before, and I knew that if there was anything worth uncovering about Gloria, he would find it. The phone barely rang twice before he picked up. "What's up?" he asked, his tone casual. "I need you to dig into something for me." "Gloria, I said, my voice steady calm. There was a pause, and then a low chuckle. Finally ready to fight back? More than ready. Good. Give me a few hours. I'll find something. I ended the call and leaned back against the headrest, staring at the sky through the windshield. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about getting even. This was about respect, something I should have demanded a long time ago. I had spent years convincing myself that love was about sacrifice, that enduring cruelty for the sake of my marriage was just part of the deal. But tonight, I saw the truth. Madeline never respected me. She never saw me as her equal. And if there was no respect, then what was left? I gripped the steering wheel, the anger simmering beneath my skin. They thought tonight was the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The drive home felt longer than usual. The silence inside the car was heavy, pressing against me like an unseen force. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my knuckles turning white. My cheeks still tingled from the slap, but the real wound wasn't physical. It was deeper, a cut right through my pride, my dignity, my marriage. Madeline had looked me in the eye and told me to apologize or leave. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't even considered standing by me. The woman I had vowed to love and protect had just made it clear where I stood in her life. The realization twisted in my gut like a knife. I pulled into our driveway, shutting off the engine, but making no move to leave the car. I just sat there, staring blankly ahead at the darkened windows of the house we had built together. It looked different now, cold, unwelcoming. Was it always like this? Had I been blind all along? I closed my eyes and leaned back against the headrest, breathing deeply, trying to steady my thoughts. The past year flashed through my mind. Every argument, every dismissal, every moment that I had brushed aside in the name of keeping the peace. I had ignored it. The little things. The way Madeline had started correcting me in front of her family, treating me like a child instead of her husband. The way she always took her mother's side, even when Gloria was obviously out of line. The way she barely looked at me anymore, as if I had faded into the background of her life. I had told myself it was stress. Marriage was work. She just needed time. But now, sitting in the stillness of my car, I saw the truth for what it was. Madeline had stopped respecting me long before tonight, and I had let it happen. The door to the house opened suddenly, spilling warm light onto the porch. Madeline stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face unreadable. I exhaled slowly, then got out of the car. "You're back early," she said, as if I had just come home from running errands and not walked out of her parents' house after being humiliated. I stepped inside, ignoring her comment. The air between us was thick, like the tension before a storm. I walked past her, straight to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady, but my pulse hammered beneath my skin. Madeline followed, stopping in the doorway, watching me. "Are you going to talk to me?" she finally asked. I took a sip of water before setting the glass down. Then, I met her gaze. "Talk to you about what?" My voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. She scoffed. "Don't act like you don't know. You embarrassed my mother tonight." I let out a humorless laugh. "I embarrassed her?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You saw what happened, Madeline. She slapped me, in front of everyone, and you told me to apologize." Madeline shifted uncomfortably, arms tightening around herself. "You should have just apologized and let it go." I stared at her in disbelief. "Let it go," I echoed. "Your mother humiliated me in front of your entire family, and you want me to just let it go?" She sighed, exasperated. "She overreacted, I admit that. But you know how she is. She was raised differently. She values respect." I barked out a bitter laugh. "She values respect?" The woman who just disrespected me in front of everyone. I took a step closer. "And what about you, Madeline? Do you value respect? Because you didn't give me any tonight." She flinched, but quickly masked it with irritation. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" I stared at her, searching for something in her eyes. Regret, guilt, even a flicker of hesitation. But there was nothing, just annoyance. That was it. The moment I knew. I had married a woman who didn't care how she made me feel. A woman who saw her mother's respect as more important than mine. A cold, numbing sensation spread through my chest. "Madeline," I said quietly, "tell me something." She hesitated. "What? If I had slapped your mother tonight, in front of everyone, would you have told her to apologize to me?" Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. The hesitation lasted just a second. just long enough for me to see the truth in her eyes. She wouldn't have. She wouldn't have even considered it. Her silence spoke louder than any excuse she could have made. I nodded, stepping back as the weight of that realization settled in my bones. I see. She frowned. What does that mean? It means, I said, voice even, that I finally understand where I stand in this marriage. Madeline rolled her eyes, frustration clear in every movement. Oh my God, stop being so dramatic. It was one night. One argument. Are you really going to act like our entire marriage is ruined because of it? I exhaled through my nose, looking away. No, I admitted. Our marriage was ruined long before tonight. She tensed. Excuse me. You stopped respecting me a long time ago, I said simply. I just refused to see it. Her jaw tightened. You're being ridiculous. You're blowing this out of proportion. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Maybe. Or maybe I've just finally had enough. She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned and walked past her, heading upstairs. Where are you going? She called after me. To get some sleep, I said without looking back. But that was a lie. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to think. Think about the years I had wasted. Think about the respect I had let slip through my fingers. Think about the man I used to be before I let myself become this. Most importantly, I was going to think about what came next. Because tonight wasn't the end of this. It was just the beginning. I sat in the dimly lit bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Sleep refused to come. My mind was too awake, too alive with the memories of the night, the echoes of humiliation still vibrating in my chest. The slap was nothing compared to the look on Madeline's face, the sheer indifference. That was what hurt the most. I turned over in bed, glancing toward the empty space beside me. Madeline was downstairs. I could hear the distant hum of the television. She hadn't come to bed. She hadn't tried to talk to me. No apology. No attempt to fix things. She didn't care. Maybe she never had. I exhaled slowly, pushing myself up into a sitting position. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. I needed clarity. I needed to understand what had gone wrong. When had I lost control of my own marriage? Then, the thought struck me. Gloria. Madeline hadn't always been this way. There was a time when she was warm, loving mine. But over the years, something had changed. Gloria had changed her. The poisonous whispers, the constant judgment, the subtle conditioning. It had all led to this moment, where my wife saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. And I wasn't going to sit back and accept it anymore. I reached for my phone and dialed Carter, my best friend since college. More than that, he was an attorney, and one of the sharpest minds I knew. If there was anything to find on Gloria, Carter was the man who would dig it up. The call barely rang twice before he answered. Man, it's past midnight. This better be good. I let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. Oh, it's good, I said, rubbing a hand over my jaw. I need a favor. Name it. I took a deep breath. I need you to dig into Gloria. Everything. Bank records, property, any legal troubles, anything shady. If she's hiding something, I want to know about it. There was a slight pause before Carter spoke again. This about what happened tonight. I clenched my jaw. Of course, he already knew. News traveled fast in Madeline's family, and her relatives thrived on gossip. Yeah, I admitted. And I have a feeling this goes deeper than just her being a controlling nightmare. Carter let out a low whistle. All right, give me a few hours. I'll see what I can find. I nodded to myself. Appreciate it. Always. You deserve better than this crap, man. I hung up and exhaled slowly, feeling a small sense of relief. At least I was doing something. I wasn't just sitting here, waiting for another slap, another humiliation. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling. If Gloria had secrets, I would find them. And when I did, she would learn that humiliating me had been the worst mistake of her life. Morning came with an eerie stillness in the house. I woke up feeling oddly refreshed, my mind clear. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. I got dressed in silence, listening for any signs of Madeline. She was still in the guest room. Good. I had no interest in pretending everything was normal. By the time I made my way downstairs, my phone vibrated with an incoming message. Carter, you're going to want to see this. My heart pounded. I quickly grabbed my keys and left the house without a word to Madeline. Carter's office was in a sleek downtown building, modern and minimalistic. When I walked in, he was already waiting, a folder in his hand, and a knowing smirk on his face. "That was fast," I said, shutting the door behind me. "I don't play around," he replied, sliding the folder across his desk. "Take a look." I opened it, my eyes scanning the pages. And then I froze. There it was. Multiple bank transactions, large sums of money wired to a private investigator, a hidden real estate property under a false name, shell companies, and then the biggest bombshell of them all, an affair. I slowly placed the papers down, staring blankly at them. "She's been cheating on Richard?" I asked, almost disbelieving. Carter nodded, leaning back in his chair. "For years. And she's been covering it up with those fake business trips." He let out a dry chuckle. "Gloria's not just a control freak. She's a fraud." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. I had expected something, but not this. This was nuclear. "What are you going to do?" Carter asked, studying me. I met his gaze. "I'm going to use it." His eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded. "Figured you'd say that. Just be careful. Women like Gloria don't go down without a fight." I stood, sliding the folder back to him. "That's fine. I'm not fighting. I'm ending this." As I walked out of Carter's office, my pulse pounded with anticipation. Gloria thought she could humiliate me and walk away unscathed. She was wrong. When I got home, Madeline was waiting for me in the living room, arms crossed, an irritated look on her face. "Where were you?" she demanded. I set my keys down calmly. "Out." Her eyes narrowed. "We need to talk." I smirked. "Yeah, we do." She seemed caught off guard by my tone, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, I know you're upset about what happened last night, but you can't just leave like that without saying anything. It's childish." I let out a slow breath. "You know what's childish, Madeline? Allowing your mother to disrespect your husband in front of an entire room and then expecting him to apologize for it." Her face flushed with anger. "You just don't understand how my mother is. She's always been strict. She doesn't mean—" "Cut the crap, Madeline," I interrupted, stepping closer. "This isn't about your mother being strict. This is about you choosing her over me every single time." She fell silent, lips pressed into a thin line. I watched her carefully. "Do you even respect me, Madeline?" She flinched, just like last night. That hesitation told me everything. I smiled coldly. "That's what I thought." She took a step back. "What are you planning?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "You'll find out soon enough." As I turned to walk upstairs, I heard her call after me. "You're acting crazy." I paused, glancing over my shoulder. "No," I said. "I'm finally thinking clearly." She had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The house was silent when I stepped inside. The kind of silence that felt wrong. Too still. Too heavy. I had spent the entire day preparing for what was coming. I had made calls, set things in motion, and now, all that was left was to wait. But patience had never been my strong suit, especially not when my blood was boiling beneath the surface. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat in the living room, my fingers tapping against the glass as I listened to the distant sound of a car pulling into the driveway. They were here. Madeline, Gloria, and Richard. I had been expecting them. The front door opened with a sharp creak, and in walked Madeline, looking tense. Her mother followed closely behind, her heels clicking against the floor, her usual air of superiority wrapped around her like a cloak. Richard was the last to step inside, his face unreadable, his posture stiff. Gloria barely spared me a glance before speaking. "I assume you've had enough time to reflect on your behavior," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the burn settle before answering. "Oh, I've done plenty of reflecting." Madeline sighed and crossed her arms. "Can we just talk about this like adults?" I smirked. "That depends. Are you ready to act like one?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't start." I leaned back in my chair, my gaze shifting to Gloria. "You came all this way, so let's skip the theatrics. What do you want?" Gloria scoffed. "An apology, for starters. You embarrassed me last night." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Let me get this straight," I said, tilting my head. "You slapped me in front of an entire room of people, humiliated me, and then my own wife told me to apologize for it. And you still think I owe you an apology?" Gloria's lips curled in distaste. "You should have handled yourself better. It was an accident, but instead of diffusing the situation, you stormed out like a child." I nodded slowly, setting my drink down. "You're right, Gloria. I should have handled it better." Her expression shifted slightly, sensing something beneath my words. I stood up, straightening my shoulders. That's why I took some time to think. And in that time, I made a few phone calls, had a few conversations. I turned my gaze to Richard, watching him carefully, and I learned some interesting things. Gloria stiffened. What are you talking about? I smiled. Tell me, Gloria, how was your last business trip? A flicker of something. Panic flashed across her face before she masked it with annoyance. That's none of your concern. Richard shifted beside her, his brows furrowing. What is he talking about? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I swiped the screen a few times before holding it up. A series of photos filled the screen. Gloria with another man. Hotels, restaurants, private getaways. Richard's face paled. Gloria's entire demeanor changed in an instant. Where did you get that? She hissed. I shrugged. Does it matter? Madeline's mouth opened slightly, confusion and disbelief written all over her face. What is this? Richard slowly turned to Gloria, his voice dangerously low. Is this true? Gloria stammered, reaching for an excuse, but there was nothing she could say. I always wondered why you looked down on me. I continued, my voice calm. But now I see it clearly. You act like you're above everyone, but you're just a liar, hiding behind a perfect image. And you thought you could treat me like garbage. I shook my head. No, Gloria, not anymore. Richard took a shaky breath, his fists clenching at his sides. You've been cheating on me? Gloria's panic escalated. Richard, please, it's not. Save it, he snapped. His face was cold, detached, like a man seeing the truth for the first time. I'm done. Gloria reached for him, but he stepped back, disgust clear in his eyes. Madeline looked between them, then turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. You did this on purpose. I met her gaze without flinching. No, Madeline. Your mother did this to herself. I just made sure the truth came out. Her face crumbled for a brief second before anger took its place. You wanted revenge. I exhaled. No, I wanted respect. But since none of you thought I deserved that, I decided to give you a taste of your own medicine. Gloria whirled back to Richard. You're really going to believe him over me? Your own wife. Richard let out a humorless laugh. I don't have to believe him. The proof is right there. He shook his head in disgust. I should have known. You always made it clear you thought you were better than everyone. Turns out, you were just a fraud. I watched as realization sank into Gloria's features. She was losing. Her power. Her control. Everything. Madeline was silent, her expression unreadable. But I could see it, the cracks forming in the perfect life she had chosen over me. You need to leave, I said, my voice firm. Gloria turned back to me, her face twisting with rage. You think you've won? I met her glare head on. I think you finally got what you deserved. She scoffed, grabbing her purse with a sharp motion. You'll regret this. I took a step closer, lowering my voice just enough for only her to hear. No, Gloria. You will. She turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Richard followed, quieter, but with a weight in his steps that told me he was done. That left just Madeline and me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, she finally whispered, I don't know who you are anymore. I smiled faintly. Maybe you never did. She swallowed hard, tears forming in her eyes. Do you still love me? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch, the weight of everything settling between us. Finally, I spoke. I love the woman I married, I said quietly, but I don't know if she exists anymore. Madeline's breath hitched, her lips parting as if to say something. But no words came. I walked past her, heading upstairs, leaving her to sit in the wreckage of the life she had chosen. She had sided with her mother against me. Now, she had no one left to side with. And I didn't feel sorry for her. Not one bit. The house was quiet after the storm of the confrontation. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settled like dust after destruction. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a cup of coffee I had no intention of drinking. The air was thick with the echoes of what had just happened. Gloria storming out, Richard walking away, and Madeline left standing there, shaken but not broken. No, she was still Madeline, still proud, still unwilling to admit she had been wrong. I could hear her moving upstairs, her footsteps slow, hesitant, as if she was debating whether to come down and face me. I had spent years trying to decode her emotions, trying to understand the inner workings of a woman who once loved me, but had slowly, methodically, stopped. But tonight, I didn't care to understand her anymore. A sharp knock on the door broke my thoughts. I knew who it was before I even opened it. Carter. I unlocked the door and stepped aside. He walked in, tossing a file onto the kitchen counter. I found more, he said simply. I raised an eyebrow. More? Carter smirked. You didn't think Gloria's affair was the only skeleton in her closet, did you? I exhaled slowly, already knowing I was about to hear something that would make the situation even worse. For them, not for me. Carter leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Gloria's been funneling money through shell accounts. At first, I thought it was just a way to cover her affair expenses, but then I dug deeper. Turns out, there's a lot of unaccounted for cash. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I frowned, flipping through the documents. Where's it going? That's the interesting part. Carter tapped the folder. She's been making large monthly payments to a private investigator. Not just any PI either. This guy specializes in handling discrete problems. People use him for blackmail, intimidation, sometimes worse. I looked up at him. And you're telling me this because? Carter's smirk widened. Because guess who the main subject of her PI's investigation was? I already knew the answer before he even said it. Me, I muttered. Carter nodded. For the past 6 months, she's been having you followed. Your work schedule, your financial records, even your medical history. Hell, she even got access to your old college records. He paused, then added, she's been looking for something to use against you. I clenched my jaw, the realization hitting me like a cold slap. Gloria hadn't just hated me. She had been actively trying to ruin me. Why? I asked, my voice low. Carter shrugged. Who knows? Maybe she wanted to get rid of you before you could ever stand up to her. Maybe she was just looking for something to control you with. Either way, it backfired, because now. He tapped the folder again. Now, we have something on her. I stared at the papers, my mind working through the implications. This wasn't just about a toxic mother-in-law anymore. This was calculated destruction, and I was done being her target. Carter watched me carefully. So, what's the plan? I inhaled deeply, then exhaled. We use this. He grinned. That's what I like to hear. Before I could respond, I heard movement behind me. I turned. Madeline stood at the bottom of the stairs, pale, shaken. She had heard. Her eyes darted to the file, then to me. What is this? I didn't bother hiding it. Your mother's been paying a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. She's been trying to find a way to destroy my life. Madeline blinked, her throat bobbing as she swallowed. That doesn't make sense. I laughed, a bitter, humorless laugh. Doesn't it? Because it makes perfect sense to me. I took a step toward her, holding up the file. This is who your mother is, Madeline. The same woman you defended last night. The same woman you chose over me. She shook her head, taking a shaky step back. She wouldn't. She did. I cut her off. And I'm done pretending she's just strict or old-fashioned. She's a manipulative liar who has been trying to ruin me from the very beginning. Madeline's breathing was uneven now. Panic. Doubt. Why would she do this? She whispered. I exhaled slowly. Because I was never good enough for you in her eyes. And you know what? Maybe she was right. I stepped back, my voice dropping lower. Because if I had any self-respect, I would have left a long time ago. The words hit her like a slap. Her eyes shone with something unreadable, something fragile. For the first time, she looked small, like a woman realizing she had put her faith in the wrong person. She's my mother, she whispered, almost to herself. And I was your husband, I said, voice steady. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. What are you going to do? I looked at Carter, then back at her. What do you think? Madeline's lips trembled. You're going to destroy her. I didn't confirm or deny it. Instead, I picked up the file and tucked it under my arm. You should go see your father, I said. He's going to need support. She didn't move. She just stood there, watching me, realizing that she had lost something. Maybe she still loved me. Maybe part of her had never thought this would happen. But it did. And now, it was too late. I walked past her, Carter following behind me. As I reached the door, I paused for a brief moment. Then, without looking back, I said the words I never thought I'd say. I don't think I love you anymore, Madeline. I stepped outside, leaving her alone in the house she had chosen over me. And this time, I wasn't coming back. I sat in my car outside the house, gripping the steering wheel as the weight of everything settled over me. The silence inside the vehicle was almost suffocating, but it was nothing compared to the storm that was about to hit. Gloria had built an empire of deception, a perfectly crafted illusion of power, respectability, and control. She had spent years dictating the lives of those around her, molding them into what she deemed acceptable. But all illusions eventually crack, and I was going to shatter hers. I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. My destination was clear: Richard's house. When I arrived, the house was dark, except for the dim glow of the porch light. I knocked once, then twice. I could hear movement inside before the door creaked open. Richard stood there, disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his face pale. He looked like a man who had just realized the last 20 years of his life had been a lie. He blinked at me, as if unsure whether to invite me in or slam the door in my face. I made the decision for him. I stepped inside. The living room was a mess. Papers scattered across the coffee table, an untouched glass of whiskey sweating on the side table. The television was on, but muted, the news ticker scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Richard sat down heavily on the couch, rubbing his temples. "I assume you're not here to gloat," he muttered. I sat across from him. "No, I came to talk." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Talk about what?" "How my wife has been screwing another man. How she's been lying to me for years. Or how she's been throwing money at private investigators to dig into your life, instead of focusing on her own failures." I didn't respond. He already knew the answers. He sighed, leaning back. "You're divorcing Madeline, aren't you?" I studied him carefully. "Would you blame me?" His jaw tightened. "No, I wouldn't." Silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of our shared misfortune. Then, Richard shook his head. "I always knew there was something off about Gloria. She always needed to be in control. Even when we were young, it was always about her image, her reputation. I just never thought." He trailed off, running a hand over his face. I was a fool. I watched him for a moment before speaking. "You're filing for divorce, aren't you?" He let out a slow breath. "Yes." A part of me felt sorry for him. He had spent his entire life devoted to a woman who saw him as nothing more than a tool. But another part of me knew this was justice. She had built a house of lies, and now it was crumbling. "She won't go down without a fight," I warned. Richard's mouth curled into a bitter smirk. "Let her fight. She's got nothing left to use against me. And the truth? It's the one thing she can't control." For the first time in years, I saw something in Richard's eyes that I hadn't seen before. Freedom. Gloria had lost. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. I had barely gotten out of bed when my phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages, missed calls. Some from Madeline. Some from unknown numbers. But the one that caught my attention? A news article. I clicked the link, my eyes scanning the headline. Prominent socialite Gloria D. caught in scandal. Allegations of infidelity, fraud, and embezzlement surface. I let out a low whistle, scrolling through the article. Someone had leaked everything. The affair, the secret bank accounts, the shady transactions. And at the center of it all, Gloria, unraveling before the public eye. My phone rang. I picked up without hesitation. "Carter, you see the news?" he asked, amusement clear in his voice. "I see it," I said, still skimming through the details. "You're welcome," he added. I paused. "You leaked it." Carter laughed. "I just made sure the right people found the right information. The rest took care of itself." I shook my head, a small smirk forming. "She's going to go ballistic." "Oh, she already is. Her lawyer's scrambling to do damage control, but there's no spinning this one. She's finished." A deep sense of satisfaction settled in my chest. Gloria had spent years looking down on me, treating me like I was nothing. And now, she was the one with everything to lose. As I hung up the call, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. I had spent years being trapped in this toxic cycle, constantly bending over backward for people who never truly valued me. Now I was free, and I wasn't looking back. By midday, Madeline showed up at my doorstep. I opened the door to find her standing there, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She looked at me as if she barely recognized me. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice almost hesitant. I stepped aside. She walked in, arms wrapped around herself. I could see the weight of everything crushing down on her. "She's ruined," she whispered. "My mother, she's lost everything." I nodded, leaning against the counter. "She did it to herself." Madeline turned to me, her gaze searching. You knew this would happen, didn't you?" I didn't answer. She already knew. She exhaled shakily. "I don't know what to do." I studied her carefully. "That depends. On what? On whether you want to keep living in her shadow or finally step out of it. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. We stood there in silence, and for the first time, I saw it. Madeline wasn't just mourning her mother's downfall. She was mourning the person she thought she was supposed to be. I didn't know if she would ever change. I didn't know if she would ever truly understand what she had lost. But I knew one thing. I was done waiting for her to figure it out. You should go, I said quietly. She flinched, as if the words had physically hit her. But she didn't argue. She just nodded, turning toward the door. And as I watched her leave, I knew. This time, it really was over. No more second chances. No more waiting. No more looking back. For the first time in years, I was finally, truly free. The days that followed were a whirlwind of destruction. For Gloria, for Madeline, and for the entire illusion they had built over the years. I watched from a distance as their world crumbled, piece by piece. I had spent too long being the punching bag, the one they ridiculed, dismissed, and discarded when it was convenient. But now, I was simply a spectator, and they were the ones drowning. It started with Richard officially filing for divorce. The moment he served Gloria the papers, the real storm began. He had spent years being the silent, obedient husband, but something inside him had snapped. And once that leash was broken, there was no fixing it. Gloria was furious. She tried damage control, but it was already too late. The news of her affair had spread like wildfire, and in a world where reputation was everything, she had become a walking scandal. She went from being a woman people feared to a woman they pitted. Her so-called friends, the ones who had always gossiped behind her back but smiled to her face, were the first to abandon her. Her standing in high society? Destroyed. The invitations to exclusive events? Revoked. The carefully curated image she had spent decades building? Shattered. But the real blow came when her lover's wife found out. Turns out, Gloria wasn't his only affair. And once his wife got wind of everything, she did what any wealthy, scorned woman would do. She made sure he paid for it. In a matter of weeks, Gloria had lost her lover, her husband, and her entire life's work. And as for Madeline, she was collateral damage. I had moved out of the house we once shared. The moment I made it clear that there was no going back, I packed my things, signed the papers, and left. Madeline had begged me to reconsider. I still remembered that night. She had shown up at my apartment, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair disheveled, a far cry from the composed, confident woman I once knew. "Please," she had whispered, standing at my door. "Let's just talk." I had stared at her for a long moment, the ghost of our past hanging between us. Then I stepped aside. She walked in, hugging her arms to herself. She looked around the apartment, taking in the minimalist space, the absence of us. I gestured toward the couch. "Say what you came to say." She swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." I didn't answer. She took a shaky breath. "I didn't mean to hurt you. She trailed off, biting her lip. "I never thought things would turn out like this." I let out a slow breath, leaning against the counter. "What did you think was going to happen, Madeline?" She flinched. "I don't know. I thought my mother." "Exactly," I cut her off. "You thought about her. Not me. Never me." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move. "You never stood up for me." I continued, my voice steady. "You let her disrespect me for years. And when she finally crossed the line, you made it clear that I didn't matter." Her shoulders shook. "I was wrong." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "Yeah, you were." She looked at me, searching for something, for hope, for forgiveness. But I had nothing left to give her. "You love me," she said, almost desperately. I exhaled slowly. "I love the woman I thought you were." A sob escaped her lips. "I can be that woman again." I shook my head. "You can't." "Why not?" I stared at her, my chest hollow. "Because I don't trust you." She broke then, crumbling under the weight of everything she had lost. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No revenge. Just emptiness. She wiped at her tears, whispering, "Is this really it?" I nodded. "This is it, Madeline." She let out a shaky breath. "I never thought I'd lose you." I didn't respond. Because she hadn't lost me. She had thrown me away. By the next day, she was gone. The divorce was finalized within the next few weeks. There was no fight, no arguments about assets. She didn't want the house. Too many memories. I didn't want it either. Too much history. So we sold it. And just like that, We erased the last piece of what we had built together. As for Gloria, her downfall wasn't just financial, it was personal. Richard took half of everything in the divorce, and without him to cover her mistakes, she was drowning in legal fees and settlements. The businesses she had secretly funneled money through, exposed. The image she had tried so desperately to maintain, destroyed. She tried filing lawsuits against the media outlets that covered her scandal, but no one took her seriously. She had no power left. By the time the dust settled, she was forced to move out of her mansion and into a small condo on the outskirts of town. And the people who once feared her? Now, they laughed at her. Karma had done its job. One evening, I found myself standing outside my new place, staring at the city skyline. The lights stretched far and wide, glowing against the dark night. Carter stood beside me, sipping his beer. "So," he said, nudging me, "how's it feel? Being free?" I let out a slow breath. "Feels like I can finally breathe again." He smirked. "Good. You deserve it." I nodded, watching the cars below, the hum of the city filling the air. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to please people who would never be satisfied. I was just me. Whole. Unapologetic. Free. Carter raised his bottle. "To new beginnings." I clinked mine against his. "To never letting anyone treat me like trash again." And as I took a sip, I knew. This was only the beginning of the life I was meant to have. It had been weeks since the divorce was finalized. Weeks since I had last seen Madeline. Since Gloria's downfall had become public knowledge. Weeks since I had to deal with any of them. And in that time, I had come to realize something strange. Silence was freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next insult. I wasn't bracing myself for another dinner filled with side-eye glances and passive-aggressive remarks. I wasn't lying awake at night, wondering what I had done wrong to make my wife look at me like I was a stranger. I was just living. And God, it felt good. But closure? That was something I wasn't sure I'd ever get. At least, not until she showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had just finished unpacking the last of my boxes. My new place was smaller than the house Madeline and I had shared, but it was mine. No memories of betrayal. No ghosts of a love that had died long before the papers were signed. I was pouring myself a drink when the doorbell rang. I frowned. Carter wouldn't just show up unannounced. And I wasn't expecting anyone else. Setting the glass down, I made my way to the door and pulled it open. Madeline stood there. Her hair was tied back, her face free of makeup. She looked different, smaller, more fragile, but I wasn't going to let myself be fooled by appearances. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What do you want?" She swallowed, shifting on her feet. "Can we talk?" I studied her, waiting for that familiar feeling, the tightening in my chest, the aching need to fix things, to try one more time. But there was nothing. No longing. No regret. No pain. Just indifference. I exhaled. "Fine, but make it quick." She stepped inside, looking around. "You redecorated." I let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, it's called having a place that actually feels like home." She flinched, but I didn't apologize. I wasn't here to make her feel better. I motioned for her to sit, but she didn't. Instead, she stood near the couch, wringing her hands. "I've been thinking a lot," she started. I raised an eyebrow. "That's new." She shot me a look, but didn't take the bait. I needed to see you." I folded my arms. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because I realized I never really told you the truth. Not just about my mother, but about everything." I didn't respond. I just waited. She took a deep breath. "I loved you. I still do, in a way, but I let her get in my head. I let her shape the way I saw you, and I didn't even realize it was happening." She looked down, her voice softer. "I thought I was protecting myself, but all I did was lose the only good thing I ever had." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. She lifted her gaze to mine. "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve it, but I needed you to know that I see it now. Everything you did for me, everything I threw away." Silence filled the space between us. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my jaw. "You're right. I'll never forgive you." She sucked in a sharp breath. "But not because I hate you," I continued. "I won't forgive you because I don't need to. That part of my life, it's over." Her lips trembled. "I understand." I nodded. "Good." She swallowed hard. "I'm leaving the city." That caught me off guard. "What?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, I can't stay here. Everything reminds me of you, of my mother, of how badly I screwed up. I need a fresh start. For the first time since she walked in, I saw something genuine in her eyes. She wasn't just looking for forgiveness. She was looking for peace. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing but relief. I exhaled. I hope you find what you're looking for, Madeline. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away quickly. You too. She hesitated, as if she wanted to say something else. But then she just gave me a small nod and walked toward the door. I didn't stop her. I didn't ask her to stay. I just watched as she stepped out of my life for good. And when the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a long, slow breath. Closure. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't satisfying in the way movies made it seem. But it was real, and it was enough. The next day, I met Carter for lunch. He smirked when he saw me. So, what's the verdict? Did she come crawling back? I took a sip of my drink. Something like that. He leaned forward. And I shrugged. She's leaving town. Carter blinked. Wait. She's leaving? Yep. He let out a low whistle. Damn. Didn't see that coming. I exhaled. Neither did I. But it's for the best. Carter studied me for a moment. You don't seem angry. I thought about that for a second. Then I shook my head. I'm not. And that was the truth. The anger, the resentment, the bitterness, it was all gone. It had burned itself out, leaving behind nothing but quiet acceptance. Carter smirked. So, what's next for you? I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have an answer. And that was okay. Because for once, I wasn't waiting for life to happen to me. I was finally, truly, in control. I raised my glass. To new beginnings. Carter clinked his against mine. To finally living for yourself. And as we drank, I knew. This was only the start of the life I was always meant to have. Life after Madeline felt strange at first. Not because I missed her, but because I had spent years defining myself through the lens of our marriage. I had been her husband, the man trying to prove himself, the one constantly battling against Gloria's disapproval, against the shifting tides of a marriage that was already sinking. But now, I was just me, and I had to figure out what that meant. The first thing I did was get rid of everything that reminded me of my old life. The furniture, the dishes, even the clothes that Madeline had once picked out for me. All of it was either sold or donated. I wanted nothing to do with the person I had been when I was with her. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry. I just wanted to start fresh. So I did. I moved to a different apartment. Nothing extravagant, just something new. Something that felt like mine. I changed my number, cut ties with people who only saw me as Madeline's ex-husband. I even switched up my routine, trying new places, meeting new people. It was liberating, in a way. No more obligations. No more expectations. For the first time in years, I could wake up in the morning and breathe. And it felt good. Of course, Carter had a lot to say about it. You finally look like a man who's not carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, he said one evening as we sat at a rooftop bar, watching the city lights flicker below. I smirked. That's because I'm not. He clinked his beer against mine. Damn right you're not. So what's next? You gonna start dating again? I exhaled, staring at the drink in my hand. Not yet. Carter raised an eyebrow. Why not? You're free, man. No strings, no baggage. Just go out and have fun. I let out a chuckle. You think jumping into something new is the answer? He shrugged. I think letting yourself enjoy life is the answer. I considered that. For years, I had been so focused on surviving my marriage that I had forgotten how to actually live. Now I had time. Time to figure out who I was outside of being someone's husband. Time to do the things I had put off. Time to be selfish for once. All right, I said, setting my drink down. Let's start with something small. Carter grinned. Now we're talking. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. I went to the gym more, not because I wanted revenge body nonsense, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I picked up old hobbies, things I had let go of because they didn't fit into Madeline's idea of what a respectable husband should do. I traveled on a whim, took weekend trips, met new people who didn't know anything about my past. For the first time, I was living without the weight of someone else's expectations. And it was intoxicating. One night, Carter convinced me to go to a social event, a gallery opening downtown. I wasn't really into the art scene, but I figured, why not? We arrived, and the place was buzzing with energy. The walls were lined with abstract paintings, and people walked around with glasses of champagne, pretending to understand what they were looking at. All right, Carter said, nudging me. Tonight, No overthinking. Just enjoy yourself. I rolled my eyes. I know how to have fun. Do you, though? He teased. I chuckled, shaking my head. Shut up and get me a drink. While Carter wandered off to the bar, I strolled through the gallery, taking in the paintings. Some were impressive. Others just looked like expensive scribbles. That's when I noticed her. She stood near a large canvas, arms crossed, tilting her head as she studied the piece. She was striking, not in an over-the-top way, but in a way that made you look twice. Her dark, wavy hair cascaded over one shoulder, and she had an air of confidence that was unapologetic. I don't know what made me walk over to her. Maybe it was the newfound freedom I had been embracing. Or maybe it was just time. You look like you actually understand this, I said, standing beside her. She turned, raising an eyebrow. And you look like you don't. I grinned. Guilty. She smirked. It's a metaphor for transformation. I glanced at the painting, a chaotic mix of colors bleeding into each other. Right. Definitely got that. She let out a soft laugh. Liar. I chuckled, shrugging. Maybe, but you make it sound interesting. Her eyes studied me, as if trying to figure me out. You don't seem like the art gallery type. I'm not, I admitted. But I'm trying new things. Good for you. I take it you actually like this stuff? She nodded. It's more than just paint on a canvas. It's about stories, experiences, emotions. She tilted her head. Kind of like life, really. I found myself intrigued. Not just by her words, but by the way she carried herself. Confident, unfiltered. Maybe I need a better guide, I said. She smirked. Maybe you do. Before I could say anything else, Carter appeared with drinks. Here you go, he said, handing me a glass. Then, he looked between me and the woman beside me, grinning. I see you've made a friend. I turned back to her. I didn't catch your name. She smiled. It's Sienna. I held out my hand. Nice to meet you, Sienna. She shook it, her grip firm. Likewise. Carter gave me a knowing look, but for once, I ignored him. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't replaying what went wrong or wondering if I could have done anything differently. I was just here, in the moment. And damn, it felt good. Later that night, as I walked through the city streets, I found myself smiling. Not because I had met someone new, not because I had finally moved on, but because I had finally let go. For years, I had been stuck in a cycle, fighting for respect, for love, for a place where I belonged. Now, I realized I didn't need to fight anymore. I didn't need Madeline. I didn't need validation from her family. I just needed to live. And as I looked up at the night sky, breathing in the cool air, I knew one thing for sure. The best part of my life was only just beginning. There's something poetic about watching the people who once looked down on you fall apart. Not because I actively sought revenge. No, I had long since made peace with my past. But because life has a way of balancing the scales, and I had a front row seat to the chaos unfolding. Gloria had lost everything. Her high society friends turned their backs on her. Richard took half of everything in the divorce, and the media wouldn't let her scandal die. She tried clawing her way back into relevance, but her name had been tainted beyond repair. And the final blow? Her bank accounts were frozen after an investigation into the financial fraud Carter had uncovered. Turns out, funneling money through shell companies isn't a good long-term strategy. She went from living in a mansion with housekeepers at her beck and call to a modest condo in a neighborhood she once sneered at. The woman who had once told me I was beneath her daughter had now become a cautionary tale. And I was thriving. One afternoon, Carter and I sat at a small outdoor cafe, watching the world pass by. You hear about Gloria? He asked, taking a sip of his coffee. I smirked. I try not to keep up, but let me guess. She's in trouble again. He chuckled. More than trouble. She got evicted from her condo. Apparently, she couldn't keep up with the payments. I raised an eyebrow. You're kidding. Nope. Carter leaned back in his chair, looking entirely too pleased. She's staying with some distant relative now. Word is, she's trying to sell her jewelry to keep afloat. I let out a slow whistle. The mighty had truly fallen. Guess karma finally caught up with her. I mused. Carter smirked. Guess so. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all settling. Years ago, if someone had told me I would be sitting here, completely unaffected by the mess Gloria and Madeline had made, I wouldn't have believed them. But now, I felt nothing. No anger. No resentment. No desire to rub it in. Just peace. And that was enough. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. Hello. There was a pause. Then, a hesitant voice said, "It's me, Madeline." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "What do you want?" She hesitated. I wanted to talk." I leaned against my desk, waiting. She was the one who walked away. She was the one who made her choice. Now she was reaching out. "Madeline, there's nothing left to say," I said, my tone even. She let out a shaky breath. "I know. I needed to hear your voice." I closed my eyes briefly. Once, those words would have meant something to me. But now, they were just echoes of a past I had no desire to relive. "You're moving on, aren't you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened my eyes. "Yeah, Madeline. I am." A long silence stretched between us. Then, she laughed, a soft, bitter sound. "I guess I always thought you'd wait for me." I shook my head. "That was your mistake." She sniffled. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know why I called. I wanted to say I'm sorry." I sighed. "I know. Take care of yourself," she said softly. "You too." Then, she was gone. And with that call, the last piece of my past was finally put to rest. A week later, I found myself back at the gallery where I had met Sienna. I wasn't expecting to see her again, but there she was, standing by a new painting, her dark hair cascading over her shoulder, completely absorbed in the art. I hesitated for a moment, then walked up beside her. "Still pretending I know what I'm looking at," I said. She turned, a smirk playing at her lips. "Still terrible at it." "Absolutely." She chuckled. "At least you're honest." I glanced at the painting, tilting my head. "This one's different from the last. More chaotic." She nodded. "It's about rebirth. The artist painted it after going through something that completely changed their life." I studied it for a moment. "Seems fitting." Sienna raised an eyebrow. "Why is that?" I met her gaze. "Because that's exactly what I'm doing." Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Starting over?" I nodded. "Something like that." She took a sip of her drink, watching me closely. "Well, for what it's worth, I think new beginnings are a good thing." I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Yeah, I think so too." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just saying it. I meant it.